Welcome to the very first episode of Mom's Basement. Steve, I will let you take it away.
So Mom's Basement is a podcast where we discuss video games, movies, and other nerd culture that shaped our lives. From inside Mom's Basement, we're going to dust off the old goodies that we feel deserve a spotlight in modern gaming and pop culture, all without wearing pants.
Most important part of Mom's Basement.
Absolutely.
So, yes, today we are going to be discussing Dune 2000. It's the game that we've
Great
picked.
game.
So, first off, before we get into Dune, let's start with the most important, well, I guess the second most important part of Mom's Basement is what you're drinking today. So, Steve, I'll let you begin.
So I've actually got a really nice vodka. It's Crystal Skull vodka.
Oh, the one from Dan Aykroyd made, right?
Dan Aykroyd,
yeah, of course.
Vodka. Distilled over Herkimer diamonds.
Oh.
Yes, with a little bit of tonic water and some citrus.
Fantastic.
So delicious.
Fantastic. Cheers. Pete, what are you drinking?
I happen to have two drinks.
Okay.
And they seem to have a slight resemblance to what we're talking about today. One is water, and then I also have spiced coffee.
Oh, nice. Enjoy. I am drinking
Alcoholic spiked coffee.
Yeah, exactly. I am drinking
spiced coffee.
I'm also taking the Pete approach. This is spiced whiskey mixed with a little bit of water. So, cheers, my friends.
Cheers to episode 1.
To episode 1, and at home, I hope you are enjoying your favorite kind of drink itself, and get a nice cold beverage and sit down and relax for our Mom's Basement. Sorry, I had to do my plug. But, all right, so getting into it. So today, again, on the block, we've got Dune 2000. Really quickly, this game itself was, it's an RTS. It was by Intellect Games and Westwood Studios. It was released in 1998, despite being named Dune 2000. It's a remake of Dune 2, based on the Frank Herbert Dune universe. If you've not read any of those books, they're fantastic. You really need to get into that. And basically, this game was kind of just like Command and Conquer Red Alert with Dune units instead of the Command and Conquer units. So very, I wouldn't say low budget game, but they didn't have the money to like create its own game in itself, and they had to make this on its own. So, Steve, why are we talking about Dune 2000 this week?
Well, first of all, I think that Dune in itself is such an iconic series. Like you said before, like in terms of sci-fi, it's one of the pinnacle sci-fi series.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the mid 90s, basically you had the David Lynch 84 movie, I think it was, that
correct.
kind of brought it into some of the spotlight. And then in the 90s, there was kind of this surgence of Dune where they had like video games and CCGs and card games. And I was always just a huge fan of the universe. So to me, it was like when I saw this game sitting, I think it was like Media Play. I had to pick it up. I had to check it out just because of the fact that it was not only Dune, but it was also real-time strategy. I played a lot of Warcraft 2, a lot of Red Alert, and this was one of those games where it caught my attention.
Fantastic.
And I loved it.
Fantastic. So Pete, how did you prepare for this week's installment of Dune 2000 on Mom's Basement?
Well, being a huge Dune fan,
I didn't buy the game and I didn't install it.
Exactly. My personal computer decided not to work, so I went and I watched a ton of footage. Watching a lot of it actually brought back a lot of memory from when I was sitting and watching it, being a little brother off
That's
the
true.
side.
You probably never played it. We never give you a chance.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The computer was mine.
Yeah, basically. So not much preparing, but enough.
Good, fantastic. Thank you for your minimal effort towards the podcast. I appreciate it. But Steve, how did you prepare?
Basement.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
So I found a a free install of the game, which actually didn't have any of the cutscenes. So
Yeah, that was what I was
able
going to
kind
tell
of,
you. I was going to ask him, like, was that just me? Did I not get any cutscenes or what? No.
yeah. Well, and I think in our conversations, Pete mentioned Gimli, and it was like, wait, I do remember something like that. So yeah, so I also went online and I looked it up, and I had forgotten about, like, this was like live action.
Yep.
It had John Rhys Davis,
Mhm.
who was like the lead, like he was the Atreides Mentat in the game.
Yep.
I mean, and it was a really compelling
Yeah.
story that
Yep.
unfolded. Like,
Yep.
I mean, it was legit.
I enjoyed it a lot. I think it reminded me a lot of Myst when I was going back and watching the cutscenes, because Myst was the same way,
Yeah.
where it was like you had this really kind of rough game that you could kind of navigate through, but then these, I wouldn't even call them cutscenes, these like events in the game would open up, and you have this like real time. It was all pixelated, 32, whatever bits. But yeah, it was very cool. I really brought me back to that style.
I sense a future Mom's Basement.
Yes.
On Myth.
I
Or
as well.
Riven.
Maybe
yeah.
Pete can try to buy a game that's less than $2, but
that one's available on Steam.
try.
So
yeah, exactly. But
less excuses.
so after you had played for so long, so Pete, because you didn't actually get a chance to play, I want to hear Steve talk about this a little bit. So Steve, when you played it after not playing it probably since it came out in 98, so probably the last time you played it was 99, maybe a year of playing that game, and then it switched out. So what did you feel? How was the gameplay when you were doing it?
Well, so I don't think I played the Harkonnen, so I selected them as my faction just because I remembered that eventually in the game you could get Sardaukar.
Yes.
The elite,
yeah, of course,
elite troopers of the Emperor.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of the things that I didn't remember, one is, I don't know if you did the same thing, but I tried the left click, right clicking, and it was like, why isn't this working?
Yes. I will talk about that when I get. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So that was one of those like learning curves, like barriers to get over. But some of the things that I really liked, like for the life of me, I was like, where the hell's my mini map? It's like, I can't find my damn mini map. It's like, I know that I could see it, and I didn't realize that I needed to build an outpost.
Yep.
And it's like, how cool. How cool is that in order to even have access to the map, like you're planted on the planet, you're completely blind, you have no idea where you are, until you build the outpost that actually gives you like the sight of seeing it.
It unlocks the fog of war. It's like the most brutal form of not having information. It was insane. I had the same kind of reaction when I was playing too.
But I mean, like, it took me back. Like, I thought it was really interesting also that you physically had to like guard with the units.
Yep.
So like there were so many times where like my base would get ransacked, or like infantry would get murdered with like their best friends.
They would get crushed by the tanks. That's what I did. I was like, I had like 400 units, and then like 4 tanks just rolled over so much of mine. I was like, oh, that's a mechanic I did not know about. Yeah.
The crushing too. Right?
Yeah. That's what I lost. Guys. I lost like the 5th mission like the first time I lost the 5th mission. Because until then, so I have to take away a little bit. So like when I was playing, I'm a huge RTS guy. I play a lot of StarCraft. If you watch any of my actual other Danberg SC channels and stuff like that, I am yes, a little bit of a plug. I will hope to see you on StarCraft, my channel eventually. But anyway, I have a whole separate channel for StarCraft stuff. But I play a lot of StarCraft. I'm a huge RTS guy. I love RTS. And when I was playing this game, I was going through, I was like, okay, so what's the resource cap? So it's just basically get spice, and spice is how you spend things. But then there's this concrete. Like there's a whole nother like resource. I figured it's the concrete, because you have to put concrete down, and then you put the buildings on the concrete. And if you don't do that, they have like damage. And I was like, it's so much like monotonous clicking, but I couldn't figure out like an A move mechanic, like just an attack move. Like I would click on, how I ended up winning was I would click on one unit that would be like in front, and that my units would kill that, and then they would auto attack everything. That was the only way I could figure out how to like A move my army. But yeah, I was like the 5th mission, they unlock all this like area, because I played Atreides. I played the Atreides because that's what I did as a kid. I didn't know you could really select all the other ones, and I thought they were like scary, so I just played Atreides back in '98 when I was like 7 years old, 8 years old. So I was doing that, and I made a massive unit, like just bio. It's just like, let's just throw bio at it like it's Terran in StarCraft. And no, I got run over and mulched by tanks. Like they just literally rolled over my army and then bulldozed my town. I was like, all right, well, that was fun. That was a good first experience, but it was very cool. There's some mechanics I think are really clunky, like again the A move, but the Fog of War unlocking I think was really interesting. Yeah, it's just really cool. I liked it a lot.
I think what was interesting to me also was like you talked about that whole concrete mechanic. I
Mhm.
mean, to know that like from a narrative standpoint or thematic standpoint, like Dune is a harsh wasteland.
Yep.
It's got sandworms. It's got like sandstorms. It's got all of these things that can like wreck. So if you don't take the time to actually establish a solid foundation for your buildings, they come in weathered. They come in damaged.
Yep.
Like, from a thematic standpoint, that's so cool.
It was. I enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed that very much. It was very immersive in the game. But I know, Pete, you didn't get a chance to actually get your hands behind the keyboard and play. But while you were watching a little bit, was there something that you remembered basically like,
Just like when he
more
was growing
enjoyable?
up.
Yeah, just like when he was growing up. Was it more enjoyable to watch it now that you're older, or did you enjoy watching it more as a kid?
So it was actually kind of funny watching it because I actually remember the first time you sat down with me and you're like, all right, you're going to be Ordos because Steve's Harkonnen, I'm Atreides, so you get to be the third one.
I kind of
all right,
vaguely
this is
remember
great.
this.
Third
Yeah,
one.
the third
But
one.
it's funny because they're not even mentioned until like way later in the books. But what I kind of liked about it was the fact is I remembered so much of it. Like I remember being afraid to click units into the sand because you'd hear that electric sound. And
Oh,
and they're
yeah.
like, oh, worm sign. I'm like,
Worm
no,
sign.
everyone back on the land. Everyone back on the land. And so that was a huge part that I remembered. And for some reason, as soon as I was watching the Atreides footage, I heard that voice and it was like building. And I was like, oh, it all came back.
Yeah, building.
That's lasting, right? Yes, building.
Mine was the anxiety from unit lost. Unit lost. I was like, oh, fuck, no. I was just like constantly in anxiety from hearing that. But that's also in Command and Conquer and stuff too. But yeah, I had a really good time. I guess.
Even what Steve was saying with the concrete mechanic too is, when you were talking about StarCraft, like the Zerg have creep and you have to kind of expand that. But for there, it's, yeah. And for this, it was kind of interesting because you would build your building and then you would choose where it would go. So you could have concrete anywhere, but then it's literally like you can amass the building and then you might realize halfway through the mission, like that was the wrong place to put
Yeah,
that.
totally.
And so literally while it's sitting massing supplies, you can be like, it's going to go here. Then you get attacked. You're like, nope, it's going back here.
Yep.
So that was something I had forgotten about.
Yeah, I had a good time. I made a bunch of harvesters. I had like 3-4 harvesters going out on the map, like really banking up spice and just like massing out units. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, I had made a lot of mistakes where I wouldn't have enough concrete for a building. And like when you select the building, you either have to wait until it to completely make. You can cancel it and then put down more concrete, but then you have to wait for the whole thing to build again. And I was like, oh, I don't want to wait. Let's just throw it down. And then I had to constantly repair it. So it was this huge like juggling act. It was very fun, but I think it was a little bit dated, to be quite honest. There were some mechanics I was like, there's no A move that I can figure out, and that is a little bit rough. But overall, I had a really fun time with it. It was a good pick from Steve as the first game. I think it was very fun.
Iconic.
But we kind of jumped into this a little bit, Pete, when you were talking about this from what you remember from it in the past, and I know that you had kind of just watched a lot of it as a kid. But Steve, was there anything that when you were playing this game or bringing back to where you were in 1998 when you bought this game, when you played it, there was a lot of other games out on the market, and we kind of talked about it in the intro with like Command and Conquer, and Dune 2 was already out at that time, and they re-released with Dune 2000, and this kind of like 2000, no matter what it was, in like 1997 to 2004, yes. It was whatever 2000. Yeah, right. But from this kind of 1998 era when you were, I don't remember exactly how old you are in 98, but
15.
Yeah, so you were basically a high school kid and playing these kind of games. Was there anything that you kind of remember a little bit more fondly from the past, or was there anything like that when you were playing this kind of brought you back to when you were 15 back in high school?
Yeah, I mean, I remember going over and having like sleepovers with friends, and we would set up and stay and play real-time strategies all night. Mm-hmm. And I think what was so unique about Dune 2000, not 2 but 2000, was that you could tell they really put a lot of production, maybe not into the game mechanics, but they got like a pretty high profile cast
Yeah.
to skin that. I mean, it was a compelling story.
Mm-hmm. That was where the budget went. You could tell.
For sure. It's like we got this Command and Conquer reskin. But what was interesting is like I think 98 was the same year that StarCraft came out. I mean, you
Correct.
mentioned you're a big StarCraft player.
Correct, 1998.
And we were all like, all my friends and I were real time. I think it was 8. I think it was 98.
I think you're right. The actual release. I'll check it. You can keep going.
But no, I like as a real time strategy game. I thought what was really neat.
December 18th, 1998. So 1999 minus 15 days. So we're both right.
Right. We're both right. We win. Cheers.
Cheers.
But no, I think like it definitely, to me, like Pete was talking about, like those ideas of like building,
mm-hmm.
unit lost, worm sign, like that's what like I remember about that game. I remember those calls, those call outs. I remember having to like go, oh shit, where's my harvester, when you hear worm sign and you see the damn electricity and you're trying to like trying to move that thing away. It's like, get as much spice as you can, then get out.
Like, then you send your inventory out and they try to gun down a sandworm. It takes forever. Yeah.
Right. Or accidentally driving one of your trikes over top of it,
yep.
And the worm just underneath it.
Yeah, it's like, all right, there it goes. That's fine. Luckily, those are cheap as shit, so it's no problem. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I had a great time with it. But we've got this Dune 2000 that it's completely encapsulated in media. And the reason I think Dune 2000 was, I would say it's a popular game. Obviously when you're comparing it to things like, Call of Duty and like PlayStation titles, and 98 was one of like the golden eras of PlayStation, like the PlayStation 1 games that were all coming out, a lot of the horror survival games and stuff like that were out at that time, that were, Resident Evil was picking up, and there's a lot of other huge mainstream games. But if you played computer games in the 90s, in the late 90s, Dune 2000 I think would be a game that popped up.
Yeah, I mean, computer games were real-time strategies.
Yeah.
It was like you were playing EverQuest. You were playing real-time
EQ.
strategies. Like, yeah, it's another one, right?
Yeah.
You were playing real-time strategies like Command and Conquer, Warcraft 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then when StarCraft launched, StarCraft was huge, changed the whole landscape. Or you were playing Dune.
It's true. And Dune had like there was like a point and click adventure Dune that was out, that was a lot of fun. I remember playing a lot as a kid. But then there was this kind of surrounding media to it as well. So obviously the book series, I think we've all at least read the first book. Pete, you've read the first Dune, right? The first book.
I've read most of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't read most of them. I've read the first 3 books only. I've not read the ones after that. I'm still working on it. But about this other media, there were these movies that came out. Actually, one of the things I did to prepare for myself for this week was I went back and watched the old video release. I don't remember the year of Dune, but the one where Sting is Fade. yeah. And I watched that, and then I watched the miniseries. I watched the miniseries of Dune as well. I have that on DVD, so I threw that in.
Which I think actually came out in 2000.
Yeah, I think that is the official Dune 2000. But it actually kind of held up a little bit. The acting's a little wonky, but Dune 2000 for effects, I was like, you know what, this isn't bad. This is not bad.
Dune 2000 came out in 1998.
Okay.
Dune miniseries came out in 2000, but almost 2001.
Yeah, I love it. They're skimming the border, like, we got to get it out in 2000. Just got to get it out. But Pete, did you have any other nostalgia from watching those videos on? I assume you watched them on YouTube, the like a let's play of someone playing it on YouTube for your prep for this week. Was there anything else that you kind of remembered or that brought you back from when you were watching that kind of stuff?
Thinking to it a little bit, I remember sitting and watching Dune 2000 with you as well, and then there was one night I'm like, oh, that's that, and like I realized like this is the same movie as the game that you guys had been playing for so long, and so I was like, I want to go play that, because I understood like, oh, now I know who Paul Atreides is, now I know what Solaris is and Spice and all of that stuff. But I think a lot of it just came back to the units were really different than what you'd actually see in the books where it's like, you know, an infantryman, but the one I remember the most is the thumper.
Oh,
Like that was one thing that stuck with
Oh
me so hard, is that
yeah.
little thing just going up and down in the
Thump,
desert,
yeah.
and you just see the worm signs going around it.
Yeah, that
Like,
was really cool.
that to me is like a visual memory that I have of it.
No, that's a really good
Well,
point.
and I think that was something that I think was pretty unique about Dune 2000 was, you know, compared to like the Command and Conquerors into Warcraft 2, if memory serves, is like they each had some, like most of the units were pretty similar,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it was like you had the orc fighters or you had the human fighters. You had, you know, like you had some variation because I think in Warcraft you had like goblin saplings, and then
Correct.
humans had like knights or something like that. Um, and realized that Dune 2000 is pre-StarCraft, and StarCraft I
Yeah.
think was the first game that really went like true variety.
Yep.
Like you had three different races that felt unique
Mhm.
in their own right. And I think Dune 2000 kind of laid some of the grounds. Dune 2 laid some of the foundation for that because you had like Atreides could get the Fremen, which had their own unique abilities.
Mhm.
You know, the Harkonnens, the Sardaukar, would explode if you ran over them. Like
Yep.
they were a heavy, you know, a heavy hitting unit
Yep.
that did something if you tried to like crush them. So I think that that's really like that's really unique about the game for the time is they really did try to kind of like diversify the units and make the factions feel
I
different.
think you're very correct. With a lot of with a lot of RTS, to make it not just mirror match after mirror match, you have to balance things asymmetrically. So that means if you have three races, for example, so let's relate it to Dune. So you've got the Harkonnen and the Atreides. The Atreides are kind of a very, I would say, mid-game strength composition where they get their flying units out and they're starting to, you know, be able to trade very efficiently with few amounts of units. But then the Harkonnen, the more the game goes on, they have kind of expensive units that take a while to like get. But once the Harkonnen get their kind of massive army, they can just kind of crush across. So that was a very interesting dynamic that Dune 2000 and Dune 2 were starting to bring in. And then, yeah, you know, StarCraft actually made three distinguishable races. But in Dune 2000, I think the first maybe 4 minutes, maybe 4 minutes, 5 minutes of the game. Once you start getting your actual tanks out, like the actual siege units, when those siege units start coming out, that's when you can start seeing differences because like they move different speeds, they have different armors on them, and it's kind of a rock paper scissors on what's going on. But it's very fun. Again, RTS is kind of what I do. I enjoy the hell out of it, and it was very very cool for me to come back and play a game like Dune 2000 and see how, you know, where my RTS kind of came from. And that's kind of what I took it as, is like, you know, where'd everything, as I
A
played,
history lesson.
yeah, exactly. I played StarCraft 2 for an hour and a half this morning before this, and thinking about Dune 2000 while I was playing, I was like, wow, a lot of those mechanics have, you know, been refined over time, but it's back. But so very interesting. So let's kind of shift towards future side of Dune. So there have been lots of movies. There's no more books being written right now. I think Frank Herbert and Brian Herbert have both stopped novels, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right,
Brian,
Steve?
yeah.
Yeah, Brian stopped.
Frank's dead.
Well, yeah, Frank has died, but Brian, his son, also has not been making new material, new literature recently.
No, I think it's been a couple years since he
Yeah.
and Kevin J. Anderson have released another book.
Yeah, so there might be something in the future, but not necessarily books. But there is a new movie coming out,
Yes.
Dune, the Dune movie. It's set release December 18th, 2020, which actually is one day after StarCraft released in 1998, which I just checked.
Right.
But no coincidence at all. It's just total. That's they decided that.
Means it's probably going to be as good as StarCraft.
I hope so.
hope
If
so. I
that
hope
would be great. But I
hope
heard it's a
so.
two-part series movie. There, maybe I read this wrong. I didn't want to read too much about it because I don't want to know too much about it. But for this, obviously this series that we're doing, I had to do a little bit of studying. But yeah, I checked, and it looks like it's going to be a two-part series based on the first novel of Frank Herbert, Dune. So it's basically the third iteration of this in media form, in video form. Have you guys seen any previews or anything for it? You have any opinions about the new movie coming out soon?
Just for me, I've looked a little bit at the cast, and I'm the same. I've tried to kind of stick away from trailers and previews because I tend to get overly hyped and then disappointed. Star Wars.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
No, it was very irrelevant cough is what that was.
I do question, like, to me, Jason Momoa should be Stilgar,
Oh
not
my
Duncan,
God.
Idaho. I mean, I can understand some aspect because, like you said, you guys have only read like the first 1 or 2 or 3 books.
Duncan's
right?
a hard ass in the first book, though. Duncan is
Well-
amazing in the first book, but I
well,
know he gets much
Duncan-
crazier.
But Duncan is the pivotal character.
Yep.
I mean, like Duncan is the character that all of Dune is essentially based on. I mean, he's the one that can kind of continues and the one that kind of follows and has all the memories, and is bred through. I mean, he was like in God Emperor of Dune, he was like Leto's lackey, and Leto kept like his hundreds of Duncan clones in the Coaxial tanks.
I love it. I love it. That was
After he got
yeah.
But then
after he got
was it-
pissed off at one, he'd roll over one, kill him, and then bring another one back.
It's so
Wasn't it? Is that the book 2? Isn't that the book 2 where one of the Duncan Golas actually gets the memories from all of the previous Duncans,
That's
and then he
the
basically
last. It goes insane. Yeah, that's like the last
okay,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, it's fun
those
stuff.
that's Heretics and Chapter House.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. I think this is going to be a really interesting movie. Again, I'm definitely going to see it. I don't know when it's going to release where I am, but I know in the United States, December 18th, 2020. So we're only 6 months, 7
I'll
months
be there.
away. Yeah, so I think
With
it's
my Chris knife.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You could basically wear
So
Lord
you
of the
wanna
Rings
know-
attire, but just make it brown and like wear a snorkel,
Yeah.
and then it's a still suit.
Yeah.
Fun fact, actually. So the city where he wrote it is about a 30-minute drive from where I live. So I've actually been to Tacoma, and there's actually a park in there that is like there's a dedicated area to Frank Herbert. Literally, it's where he sat
that's
and looked
sweet.
at all of the construction and was like, "I want to write a book about that."
Wow.
And that's where Dune was made.
Wow, that's cool. I would like to see that. But yeah, it's interesting. So I think for this week we kind of came in. We talked a little bit about Dune. We talked about what it meant to us, where it was, how we enjoyed it again, bringing it back up, and then where it's moving in the future. So, I mean, about Dune. Before we kind of close out this episode of Mom's Basement, is there any kind of last remarks? I guess I'll let Pete go first. I want to let Steve kind of contemplate, and I'm really actually interested to hear what he has to say about Dune 2000. But I'll let Pete go, then I'll throw in, and then I want to hear what Steve has to say about Dune 2000.
First off, thanks for the. I'm really excited to hear what the next guy has to say.
Yeah. Come on, Pete. Get it done. Get it done, Pete. Come on. We're gonna sloth Pete for this.
All in all,
Go ahead.
all in all, I love Dune. Dune. Oh no, I think Dune is great. Sorry.
No, we have to sloth Pete at least once an
Anyway,
episode. It's a rule.
yeah,
it's a
okay,
mandate.
Fine, it's fine. One thing I say that I wish that so Dune itself, like the RTS was great, and I loved that it became what it did. One thing I wish that actually followed with it was the interaction with the terrain, and that's something that you don't really see until like Age of Empires when you start getting into water units and land units.
Okay.
But no RTSs really have like, okay, you have got your opponents, but then you also have the environment. Like they actually made Arrakis feel real, where it's like, I'm gonna go kill the other base. It's like, nope, sandworms. You got to worry about that too.
That's very true, Pete.
So all in all, I think there are some things I really liked about it, and then some things I'm like, that was so good. Why doesn't that exist in other games today? But I think it does Dune itself justice, and it's basically like the grandpa of RTS.
No, it wasn't the first RTS. It wasn't the first RTS, but I agree with you. There were some very interesting parts of it, and I didn't even think about that. I don't know if there's no other game that has environmental hazards like Dune, but I think they took that out, especially for competitive stuff, because the randomness. Like if I'm just trying to turtle up and a sandworm eats one of my harvesters, it's like, well, you didn't actually attack me, but now you're ahead because a sandworm ate my harvester. So I think they took it out from that, but I think that's a really interesting aspect that they threw into that game to make it, again, feel very immersive. And while I was playing that game, even though the graphics were, obviously, I think the Marines were composed of maybe 10 pixels total, I still felt like I was controlling the Atreides army when I got, some massive things. And one of the things I did the very first game I played was I made like 3 or 4 barracks, because I'm used to StarCraft where you can make units out of each barracks, and I didn't know that in Dune you can make 1 unit out of 1 production facility. So I was planning on like spamming out a whole bunch of Marines. I had like 4 barracks, and I was making 1 Marine at a time, so I demolished all of them. I was like, I spent so much on those generators to be able to like power that much shit, and then I was making one marine at a time. I was like, oh, for God's sake.
That's another interesting dynamic. Was not only did you have the buildings to build, but you had to power them as well. I mean, again, very Protoss.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Where a lot of that came from.
Exactly, and I thought it was very fun overall. Again, Pete, I agree with you on a lot of points that it was called the grandpa or the grandfather of RTS. Maybe is doing it a little over justice, because I think there were some RTS before that, like Command and Conquer and Dune 2, that were actually laying the groundwork. And RTS in general became a thing after StarCraft. I think that's when it really. Warcraft. I'll give you Warcraft. Warcraft was a little bit more MOBA.
I think you're right. I think RTS became a thing with StarCraft.
Yeah, I agree.
StarCraft would not be StarCraft without Warcraft.
100% agreed. And then Warcraft 2 and Dune 2000 are kind of interlinked. I don't think there's any game in particular that became a game because of Dune 2000. It kind of branched, like the branch of RTS was moving this way, and then Dune 2000 popped up here as like a honorable mention, and then the RTS continued forward with, Command and Conquer, Warcraft, and StarCraft are the kings, are the three kings, the three knights of RTS.
Yeah.
But Dune 2000 cannot be discussed without. You can't discuss RTS in the 90s without at least mentioning Dune 2 or Dune 2000 is my opinion. I think it was very fun to talk about.
Agreed.
Steve, let me hear your last your overall opinion of this, and then we'll kick it off with next week and our outro.
I agree. You can go back and you can play a game like Warcraft 2 or StarCraft today, and it's still StarCraft 1. And it still feels relevant. It still feels smooth. I mean, I think that's a product of Blizzard.
Mm-hmm.
Dune 2000 was a quaint revisiting of my adolescence. It sparked a lot of memories. It actually made me go back and download on my Raspberry Pi the Dune adventure game.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
The DOS one. I think that part of its charm and part of its quaintness is the fact that it was Dune. I think it had some really interesting dynamics with the worms, with the with powering, with the real-time video and the compelling story, and it was a nice revisit. But overall, it was it's quaint. Probably won't play it again.
Probably
not. It was nice to go back.
Yeah. So that I think is going to wrap us up for this episode, and I think we are going to get into the outro of Mom's Basement. So I want to thank everyone for watching. And next week, we are going to be talking about a point-and-click adventure. We are going to go over the secret of Monkey Island. So if you're interested, please come back and join us on Mom's Basement. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.